Hi, this is Eric Prystowsky for EP on EP. This is a continuation of a conversation I'm having with James Youngblood, our CEO. And this is the segment I would call part 2, James, the growth years. We talked previously about the beginning years when you took over. So let's talk about the growth years. We're now new name, new place, Washington, D.C., HRS. You're going to take it to a new level. So what about the growth? You want to start with membership and tell us what things you did to try to build membership?
Sure. I think all of the restructuring work that we did, the rebranding of the organization started to work and take effect. And so we were getting better known. We had more sophisticated staff. We had a marketing function, which the old organization never had. So we started looking at kind of market segments. If you looked at all of the board certified EPs or EPs generally, we'd never really gotten a good grip on how many there were and how many were members and how many weren't. So we started having data to look at and using that to market, and it was effective. And the field was also growing. You remember there was a time when we were sort of training too many fellows, people felt like, because there weren't enough jobs to go around. But we were very effective at recruiting those. At the same time, HRS started getting better known to our other partner organizations in the cardiology space. And I think they recognized us more and more and recognized that we were kind of the premier organization and voice for the field of heart rhythm disorders, and started looking to collaborate with us. There was a time when I first came that I was concerned about collaborating too much with HA and the ACC because I felt like we'd get lost, and we really were trying to build our independence and, again, the brand and distinguish ourselves. And I think after a while, they started actively soliciting our help and collaborating. Guidelines is a good example. We didn't used to get top billing for guidelines, even though we were engaged and involved in writing them, and that shifted so that we did get the organization name on the masthead and started playing a much more significant part in developing the guidelines and other clinical documents, as well as educational programs and partnering on educational programs.
So you've said it as if it was matter-of-factly, but I know it wasn't matter-of-factly. I went through some of those years with you, and it was really not nice what was going on with guidelines. I mean, membership really needs to know this. Here were the top guns in electrophysiology on the guideline committee, if no other reason, because we also belonged to the Heart and the college.
Yeah.
Yet we were Heart Rhythm Society members. Mm-hmm. And you remember those years? You would say, hey, we belong on the masthead. We need to be up there, ACC, AHA, HRS. No, right? Before you were involved, we were like an asterisk on the bottom, like also participating. So that wasn't an easy process, was it, to move us to the masthead?
No, and I think again, what happened was that all of a sudden they started noticing who we were and the influence that we had and that sort of thing. We started getting more media attention as the leaders in heart rhythm disorders. So I think all of those things came together as a result of that restructuring. And if you look at all the indicators during that time, so membership, attendance at scientific sessions, abstracts submitted at the meeting, media impressions, all of that started to grow, and really pretty rapid growth until 2008 or so. And of course 2008 began the recession, and the field went through a number of radical changes then. So the recession in itself, which we didn't really feel to 2009, had an impact on physicians' ability to travel, to spend money.
Is that right? So there was a dip in attendance?
They were less likely to attend the meeting. And then coupled with that was the fact that most private practices disappeared. I think back then it was like 70%. Now I'd say it's something like 85%.
That's correct.
Merged with, bought out by hospitals. And as our physicians moved into hospitals, they had less control over their schedule. And so it was challenging times. They were more concerned about finances generally, dues and that sort of thing. So we leveled off a bit, but the organization continued to thrive during those times. You have to remember that Affordable Care was enacted at that time, which also sort of, regardless what happens with Affordable Care, forever changed the way we you practice medicine and
Correct.
Healthcare in the U.S. So just a lot of radical changes then, which fortunately we took a bit of a dip, but weathered through it, and the organization has sort of prospered ever since.
So did you make changes of a significant amount because of those things, or were you structured well enough that you could weather things until the end?
No. One of the things that happened at the end of that period, and this was several years after the recession, was that we got very concerned about the amount of dependence that we had on corporate funding for revenue, and intentionally decided to reduce the percentage of our revenue that came from corporate funding. So if you look at, we run very tight budgets with very low margins. If you look at the ways that you could decrease expenses, the only way was to reduce staff. So we went through a pretty significant staff reduction, about 25% of staff. It was tough. Those were tough years. But we, as I said, continued to thrive and even grow a little. And I think the staff restructure, and then we moved to a new headquarters location and developed a new strategic plan, which is pretty aggressive, all at the same time, kind of took the organization to the next level. So I think all of that, we ended up making it through, and probably ended up being a better organization because of all of that.
Of the restructuring you had to do. So I know at some point in this period of growth, you moved the organization more into some of the legislative areas.
Yeah.
Can you tell the listeners a little about that?
Well, when I came on board, if you remember, we had one consultant who had done some legislative work for us in DC.
Yes.
And then we hired a half-time person in DC. So when I came on board, Amy Melnick was working with this consultant, and she was the public affairs office. We slowly built it. They were in DC. When I first started coming to DC, when we knew we were going to move, I worked out of their space that they leased here, and kind of built it from there. But it was that same process of trying to familiarize legislators with who we were, what we represented, and then as they got to know us, they started looking to us for advice, seeking out our influence over any sort of legislation that came up in our space. At the same time, getting very engaged with the regulatory agencies. And most of our work in DC on the government side has been with the FDA and CMS around reimbursement issues. And until cut to the chase today, they actively seek us out for advice and help on pretty much any issue that comes up in our space. So those relationships have really paid off.
And one of the shames, I think, for our membership is, I think, while HRS under your leadership and currently what we're doing does such a great job in those areas, I think our membership actually doesn't know that.
Yeah.
How do you improve the awareness of what you're actually doing for them?
Well, I think it's something we're going to have to continue to work on. I think we don't get the word out much about the successes that we have. I think we always will fall a bit in the shadow of both ACC and HA. ACC especially, they have a much bigger presence on the legislative side. Although we have now 4 staff, we also have a legislative consultant, so we have a pretty good presence. And I think it's just like everything that HRS does for its members, we have to be much more vocal and out there about what we do, how that benefits our members, and just get the word out more. And we just haven't done a very good job of that, I think.
So that's to be continued, yes.
Yeah.
So, James, thank you so much. We're going to take a break, and we're going to move on to our third segment, and thanks for being with us.
Sure. Thank you.